All right, guys, we just want to welcome back to the Everything College Football podcast. Today, me and Nick here will be doing our Week 2 recap in college football. What a weekend it was, Nick. And, of course, we're just going to start with the headline game of the weekend. Texas goes to Tuscaloosa, knocks off the Tide by 10. You know, coming into this game, one thing I circled was this young Alabama unproven safety group against Quinn Ewers and these receivers, and they failed the test, Nick, but we knew exactly where the biggest key was going to be to decide this one. I think ultimately that's what it came down to. Quinn Ewers, 349, 3 touchdowns. Jatavian Sanders at tight end at 114. He had a lot of open space. Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, those guys also had big games. Quinn Ewers, though, Nick, he looks incredibly matured compared to last season where he really wasn't all that great, especially with the deep ball. Remember the Oklahoma State game? He was just pitiful. Gets the haircut, gets into the lab, works hard, much more focused. What a changed young man that we saw just about 9-10 months ago to where he is now. What was your thoughts on the Texas offense there on the road? They didn't look phased one bit.
Very impressed with the Texas offense. They hung in there, in the third quarter. It was a 13-9 game. So the Alabama defense, we'll talk about them a little bit. I wasn't too upset with them. Yes, they got beat over the top a couple of times. Trey Amos, Jalen Key, true freshman Caleb Downs. Even, guys like Kool-Aid and Terrion Arnold especially had bad nights. Arnold, 2 pass interference calls that were very bad. Missed tackles, just misjudged them. Really a poor performance from a guy like Arnold, who you really come to rely on. Malachi Moore had a great first quarter, but kind of tailed off. You really didn't see his name getting called after the first quarter. Ewers, he lost a lot of weight as well. He really slimmed down. He's got that slimmer frame, more agile, better moving in the pocket. Made a couple of plays with his feet as well. He looks focused. He got the haircut. When you go to the sidelines last year, sometimes he would look a little unfocused. Kind of like he might be goofing off a little bit. This year he goes to sidelines. He was locked in, sitting with his quarterback's coach, looking at the tablet, looking over plays. He was really focused all night long. They drew up a great play plan on offense. Good balance. They only had 105 yards on the ground rushing, so they really did rely on the air. 7 of 18 on third down. Texas, they definitely came out. They had a game plan. They gut punched the secondary that we thought had some issues. Those guys in the secondary that we thought could step up, Amos, Key, Downs, they just had tough nights. Caleb Downs, I'm going to give him a mulligan. He's a true freshman, tough spot to be in. But he got beat a few times where he really shouldn't have. It's a tough look for the secondary that I had high hopes for.
You look at the Alabama offense, and I figured they'd run the ball much better than they did last year because of some of the losses up front for Texas. And if anything, they were worse. Only 107 yards rushing. That includes Jalen Milroe's legs, which are certainly a big factor. He broke off a 20-yard run at one point in this game. But I think there's a concern here with Alabama at quarterback. It does not appear that they have a quarterback on the roster that can read a defense. I already know that Tyler Buchner has issues with that. Milroe, this is a guy 14 of 27, 255, 2 interceptions. It was either hit or miss with him. When his vision was there, Nick, he was on point. That drive they had in the third quarter that made it a 3-point game, phenomenal drive by him. That was one of his best. That was probably his best career drive, to be quite frankly. But the 2 picks he had, they were just awful. Didn't see people there. The vision was just incredibly poor. If his first read wasn't there, he would just, look to his left, his right, hold the ball tight, looking for an escape to run. 15 carries, 44 yards. Really wasn't even that efficient running the ball. This is kind of like a Jalen Hurts situation. A lot of people back in 2016 were high on him because of how good he was for this football team and as a runner. But I said that this guy cannot win a game with his arm, and that was pretty true the entire year, even in the game against Ole Miss where they came back. It wasn't because of his arm. It was a collective group as a football team. Hurts put in the work. Look at him now. Milroe, though, that's going to be the same situation here. Maybe the ceiling is going to be high for him because he throws a beautiful deep ball, Nick. He really does. But in this game, pretty poor performance. He can make the improvement. Still a young player, but right now at this moment in time, very concerning what you saw against a good opponent last night.
Just disappointed in what I saw from Milroe. Just did not have any passes in the middle of the field. It was either a deep ball or it was getting intercepted 2 times. He absolutely just led the defender with his eyes for 2 terrible picks, including one that was in their own defensive half that led to a red zone setup for Texas immediately. It really swung that game because there was a lot of momentum for Alabama, and then he just goes out and throws that pick. He completely led the defender with his eyes. Obviously it concerns me if they didn't make the switch to Buchner and or Ty Simpson, what they have there, how confident they are in those guys. If neither of them got to go, considering how Milroe was looking. The deep ball was nice. He hit Burton for a long stride, hit Bond at one point for a long stride as well. But overall, just poor. He overthrew his running back at one point. I believe it was Chase McClellan on a wheel route. Just overthrew him, which would have been a touchdown if he just timed that a little bit better. Another guy I want to note just on Texas quickly is Anthony Hill Jr., the freshman. He was kind of spying Milroe all night, the linebacker number 0. You saw him moving around there. He got beat in coverage a little bit, but he was mostly spying Milroe, and if Milroe even tried to make a move to run out of the pocket, which really he was doing very often, Hill was chasing him down and making tackles and being there. He had 6 tackles, 2 sacks last night for Anthony Hill Jr., who really had Milroe's number all night. That was his greatest asset, was running, and Texas knew that. They game planned for it. They knew Milroe was going to, if he didn't get his first read, he was just going to bolt out of the pocket, and he really had no ability to look for a different read, just could not read the defense at all. It's extremely concerning for this Alabama offense, which is going to be more of a focusing on the run. And when the run is not working 107 yards, they find themselves in a serious problem, and it's going to be an issue against some of these tougher teams in the SEC.
Didn't showcase much pocket presence either. Caleb Downs, of course, I singled him out as a guy to watch. He had plenty of struggles, also brought plenty of heat as well. And then Caden Proctor at left tackle, we figured that he would also be a guy that we would want to see how he does. Ethan Burke had his number all night, 4 tackles, 2 TFL, and a sack, had plenty of run stops as well. This was just a struggle fest for some of these true freshmen. They're going to be great. Obviously, they did some bright spots as well in this game. But for Alabama, Nick, this is certainly not great. I don't remember the last time, what did they say, 2007 non-conference opponent at home. So it's been a long time since something like this has happened to them. This is 3 years in a row now where this is just not the same Alabama team. Incredibly concerned with what I've seen last year, the last 2 games, really. They just played a lot of close games. They don't seem to have that thump up front in the trenches. And, of course, giving up a lot of big plays. I mean, 349 passing yards at home is a big disappointment. And then, that again, the feel on offense where we just kind of feel lifeless, like we can't do anything. It's just very interesting here if Alabama, Nick. In the past, you would say, oh, well, they're still going to be there in January playing for a national title. It's hard to say that here at this moment in time, though, with this Alabama team, which I've saw over the last 2+ seasons.
Discipline continues to be an issue as well. A bunch of penalties last night. 2 bad pass interference calls on Terrion Arnold, just plays he did not have to make. Seth McLaughlin, 2 illegal snaps. He was a veteran center. I don't understand how that happened. So he makes 2 plays in a game where he has poor snaps. Also, 2 touchdowns wiped off the board for bad penalties. The offensive line downfield one on the touchdown pass that was kind of tipped, probably should have been intercepted. Milroe, people thought he was going to run, so the offensive line just jogged down there. I don't blame them at all. The holding brings back another touchdown late in the game that could have certainly helped out. So the flags are certainly killing. The discipline, I don't understand what happened with Saban over the last 2-3 years. The discipline just has not been there. Maybe it's something more with the guys that are recruiting, NIL. I don't know what to blame here, but there is a lot of issues in discipline. I mean, we saw it last year with 15 penalties on the road at Texas. To even have half of that at home, whatever it ended up being, 8-9 penalties, is just disappointing. You cannot be making mistakes at home. It's a home crowd, 100,000 people rooting for Alabama, and you somehow just continue to screw it up and have bad pass interferences, false starts, delay of games, things like that. Just absolutely disappointing. I'm concerned for Alabama this season. I'm not going to throw in the towel just yet. Obviously, there's a lot they can do with SEC play, and losing to a team that is now certainly going to be a top 5 team in Texas that could certainly win their conference and has all the talent in the world is not necessarily a bad loss per se. It's a very disappointing loss. Alabama can certainly find a way to make this work and sneak into the playoff with 1 loss. I just don't have a lot of confidence for it. I have a feeling they're going to drop a game somewhere else in the season. It's just going to be another one of those seasons that end up in a New Year's Six bowl, and that's that.
Yeah, I was going to ask you the outlook for this team this season. You just answered the question right there. Ole Miss comes to town in a couple weeks, so we'll see how much improvements they have made. Shifting to Coral Gables, Nick, I picked Miami to win this game. A lot of action on Texas A&M, but I had confidence in this Miami team coming into the season. I picked them to go to the ACC title game, picked them to beat Clemson as well, and I'm liking what I see from this Miami team. This is a completely different football team than what we saw a season ago, or even what I was expecting. The first 2 drives, 3 and outs due to a drop and a false start. The defensive line looked big for Texas A&M for all that talent. You're like, oh man, this is gonna be a long day for them. After that, though, they kicked it in gear. This passing attack really started to find a stride. A 75-yard drive, all through the air, mainly for Miami. They had numerous 70-yard drives in this game where the passing attack was just throttling Texas A&M, which was the top-ranked secondary a season ago in terms of passing yards per game allowed. Jacoby George had 3 touchdowns. The running game, I didn't think they were all that great, but the offensive line, they were great in pass protection. A&M really didn't put that much pressure on them. While on the other side, Connor Wigman, I thought he played a pretty good game. The run game had success when getting to the boundary, outpacing those linebackers, which is certainly still going to be a bit of a concern for Miami. With the defensive line, though, they got great penetration. A&M was afraid to run it downhill at them. Wigman was under pressure a good bit. This was just a different Miami team, Nick. They were playing with a lot of, tenacity on defense early on in that game. Those safeties were flying downhill. Not sure what Cameron Kitchen's status is. He was, not moving at the end of the game. He got hurt, was carted off, appears to be all right. Not going to speculate on that, though. But he's a phenomenal player for this football team. Was a great leader. He had a great game as well. Had a pick, a fumble recovery. Overall, what are your thoughts on this game, Nick? Because I had Miami winning in a defensive affair. They scored 48 points in this one. They did not look bad one bit on offense. Van Dyke, 374, 5 touchdowns, only 9 completions. What a show for the Hurricanes.
Tyler Van Dyke, he showed us what we thought we was Tyler Van Dyke. He looked really poor last year. We really thought he was going to break out last year and just did not live up to that. And man, he's a very good quarterback. 21 to 30, 5 touchdowns, 374 yards to the air, 94.6 QBR rating. I mean, just incredible numbers from Van Dyke. He looked locked in the entire game, just a perfect pocket passer. Very talented. Restrepo had 126 yards receiving. Jacoby George, almost 100 yards receiving, plus 3 scores. Colby Young, 75 yards and a score. Isaiah Horton, 50 yards and a score. He had a 52-yard touchdown there. Cam McCormick had a 20-yard reception as well. Henry Perry's Jr., I think he looked okay out of the backfield, 5 yards per carry, 50 yards for him on 10 attempts. Not incredible numbers. A&M also, looked poor. Connor Wegman, 2 interceptions, could not run the ball at all. True freshman 5-star Ruben Owens only had 5 carries for 7 yards. Miami looks good. They're a very talented team. We knew that they had some talent, but they had to come out and put their money where their mouth is. Equally with A&M had to come out and put their money where their mouth is. And Miami's the one that does it at home. They get a huge 15-point win here. It certainly looks larger than that on paper. 15 points, it certainly could have been a lot larger of a win than that. Miami looks comfortable. That defense looks good as well. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the Hurricanes and how they played.
The first interception on Wigman really wasn't his fault. His receiver ended up slipping down. Just, one of those things that's unfortunate for you. Evan Stewart was great. 11 grabs, 142, really showcasing that. This is an interesting team because you're wondering who's going to step up wide receiver this year. George Restrepo was great. 6 grabs, 126, really showcasing their speed. Colby Young, 75 yards and a touchdown. He's had a great start to the season. Isaiah Horton, his only reception went 52 yards to the house. And then Smith, he also had, Brashard Smith, also had a kick return touchdown. Special teams was insane in this game. He had that touchdown by Miami. In the first half, he had a blocked punt and then a muffed punt by Miami that led to 14 points for Texas A&M. This should have been a blowout, Nick. Miami looks really good. This is scary. You eliminate some of those mistakes, and this is a completely different score. Very lopsided, I think, for the Canes' favor. A lot of people are going to be calling for Jimbo Fisher's head here soon, and I don't blame them. If you didn't watch the game, you only look at the score, you'll see, it's not the worst. This easily could have been a 30-point game, I think, if they don't make those mistakes, because this offense for A&M really was not clicking. Those yards they had through the air comes just from volume. 31 completions on 53 attempts. 6.3 was the average. Lance Guidry, defensive coordinator, what he was dialing up was incredible. The CB blitzes were highly effective. They ran about 4 or 5 times. They led for a tackle for loss. Jaden Davis was so good from his cornerback position. They had a 4th down. They stopped A&M, where he just comes blazing downhill. Boom, puts his helmet on the football. That thing was flying. Just what an effort. These guys were flying, Nick. I was very impressed with what I saw from Miami. Maybe some old school U shades here. Overall, what are your final thoughts on this game that could have been a lot worse on the scoreboard?
Certainly impressed with Miami. They have a tough schedule ahead of them, so they have a lot of opportunities here to continue to prove what they can do. I think this is going to be a tough schedule for this Miami team. I think the defense looked good. Like you said, Jaden Davis, 8 total tackles, 2 tackles for loss and a pass breakup. James Williams, 9 total tackles, 5 solo tackles for him. They got in that backfield. Hakeem Mesidor had a tackle for loss, plus 3 total tackles. So they got back there. The special teams was interesting as well. They made some nice moves on special teams. This is a very good Miami team that has a lot of talent. They're going to play a tough schedule. They got to play Florida State at some point as well. Are they for real? I think they certainly moved a lot closer to proving that they are for real under Mario Cristobal. How can they hang out through the rest of the season? And then A&M, what are they going to be able to do the rest of the season? Jimbo Fisher, his seat is boiling hot at this point, and if it wasn't for that massive buyout, he would have been gone today. They have a lot of issues on Texas A&M. That defensive line, despite all the raw talent and size, just cannot do anything. Van Dyke had an hour to pass back there. He could have made himself toast and ate it and then completed a pass. He was just perfectly comfortable back there the entire game. Same thing for Quiddy Ewers in the Texas game. Both those guys had hours back there to throw the ball. I think, Texas A&M, the outlook, they get to host Alabama, who are certainly looking feeble. They get to host some other teams as well. They get to play the rest of the SEC schedule. What can Texas A&M do the rest of the season?
Bad day overall for the SEC. Looking at some other notable scores, I picked Nebraska to absolutely hammer Colorado. Was wrong on that prediction, but I think I came into it with good faith, though, Nick. I said that the game plan for them was to run the ball, get Jeff Sims going on read options, QB powers, and they didn't go with that. Even when they had successful runs, they would go for a pass on 1st and 10. And Colorado's D-line's not good, but your offensive line's also incredibly horrible. The game plan here, they didn't stick to the script I thought they would. And even though they did have success, Jeff Sims, worst performance I've ever seen by a football player. He had 5 turnovers, I think, credited to him. Couldn't even do a proper handoff. Dropped 2 snaps. They were in the red zone on 2 of those, or plus territory, that is, on 2 of those. Nebraska, this game could have went completely different if Sims doesn't make these ridiculous errors that are incredibly unforced, especially for a veteran football player. Colorado ends up pulling away late. Like I said, the secondary played very good, and for the most part, they did. You won't see that on the stat sheet. But I think they're just deflated, Nick, because they're out there playing great football against a talented receiving core. Defensive line that's also really not that great for Nebraska was eating this Buffalo's offensive line. Deion Sanders 2-0, 36-14, a blowout victory in favor of them. But when you actually watch the game and consider a lot of these factors, still plenty of issues with Colorado. They just beat a really bad Nebraska football team. I'll take it on the chin. Wrong prediction. But again, I think a lot of things we learned here don't exactly make Colorado look any better than they were in week 1.
I agree. I think, Colorado does not blow me away with this performance. I think this is more about Nebraska being bad compared to Colorado being good. Jeff Sims is a terrible performance. A lot of question marks for Nebraska. Matt Rule, they seem to be really stepping back week after week. They really seem to be in a tough spot down there in Lincoln. Colorado's going to get all the hype. They got game day coming to town next week. Obviously, 2-0 is an interesting start. Certainly a lot better than I think you and I both predicted. We both had them going 0-2 to start the season. Colorado, they play good, right? Shedeur Sanders had another decent day, 393, 2 touchdowns for him. Xavier Weaver, 10 receptions, 170 yards, and a score for him. Gabe Erlin, looked good for Nebraska, was really the only bright spot for him with the 74 yards, but he had a ton of touches. A lot of question marks for Nebraska. I'm really concerned. This definitely says more about Nebraska than it does about Colorado to me.
And then Notre Dame, they completely blew out NC State. We had a long weather delay there all across America, or at least on the East Coast here. There was delays like crazy for some reason. Notre Dame, though, last year they had 4 plays of 40-plus passing yards. That's something I highlighted a lot with that offense. They already have 5 in 3 games this year. Big plays in this game, Nick. Going in the I formation, just dumping it off to a tight end, picking up massive amounts of yards. This is a good NC State defense that early on was really collapsing against the run. And for the most part, they did. First play after the break or the delay went 80 yards, asked to be on a run. The balance might be a little bit concerning of Notre Dame. They did play a really good front here. Overall, they didn't, run the ball all that great. The protection was pretty good for the most part. The running backs were incredibly decisive and physical. I think they did a great job to avoid negative plays in this one. And then the NC State offense, Brennan Armstrong, he had some great plays. That's really where their only points came, though, was from his improvisation and some really good, accurate footballs. Ends of the day, they ended up having 3 fumbles. I think they only lost 1 of them. He had 3 interceptions. This Notre Dame defensive line, that is, was really eating them apart. It seemed like they couldn't run the ball, which we kind of figure, we figured that NC State would not be able to separate with their wide receivers in this game, and they really did. Of course, you can say the same thing about Notre Dame, but we figured their running attack would certainly be a big part in trying to, move away from that. NC State, we knew they were going to be one-dimensional, and again, accurate footballs was the only reason why they were able to really move the field. Very impressive performance here by Notre Dame, able to pull away here. Sam Hartman in this offense, they seem to have adequate balance, Nick, and I think they might even be favored in a couple weeks against the Buckeyes.
Notre Dame's in a great spot here. Sam Hartman, 286, 4 touchdowns for him. You can make the case that Notre Dame is putting themselves in a good spot for the playoff, considering a lot of the SEC teams. We're certainly not going to get a 2 SEC bid this year, considering LSU's early loss, Alabama, A&M, other schools struggling. Clemson's struggling. Notre Dame gets to play them in the future. So Notre Dame's in a good spot here. They could certainly even sneak into the playoff with a single loss to USC, in my opinion. They are shaping up to be in a really good spot for the Fighting Irish. They looked good against NC State team that's not, they're not slouches, right? This is a pretty decent NC State team overall. Estimine, great day on the ground, 14 carries, 134, 2 touchdowns, incredible numbers. The defense looks dialed in. They battled through that long rain delay, ended up being like 4 hours, something like that, to get back there and get focused and get a big win on the road. This Notre Dame team's for real. This is a team that has a real path considering the schedule. They got to play Ohio State, who looked very shaky in the first 2 weeks. They could certainly knock off the Buckeyes there and put themselves firmly in the conversation. Notre Dame's in a really good spot here. Sam Hartman's hit the ground running. This offense looks great.
Looking at some of these other scores here, Washington State knocks off Wisconsin. The Badgers certainly not all that shocked because they're going over a lot of changes. They're going to be just fine. We'll see how they do in conference play. Ole Miss, a very good game against Tulane. The defense didn't look good in the first half, which really disappointed me. In the second half, only give up 3 points to a backup quarterback who's got a few starts under his belt. Jackson Dart certainly needs to continue to find that consistency. When he was on point, though, him and Trey Harris have a great repertoire going. Appalachian State took UNC the 2 overtimes, covered as 19-point dogs in that one. Oregon, they go on the road, survive a game against Texas Tech. And then Baylor and Utah, battle of the backup quarterbacks. Utah, they end up getting away with that one late where, Robertson for Baylor ends up just forcing it in the coverage with like less than 2 minutes to go, puts his defense against the back, and that's just awful how he gave away that game there. Almost got it back there at the end, though. Overall, great week 2, Nick. What are your final thoughts on some of these other games, including Cal and Auburn having a great defensive contest as expected?
I said Cal was going to hang in there. I said Cal would cover the spread to a lot of friends of mine. I said it earlier in the year when we previewed Auburn as well. I thought Cal had a great chance in this game, and they missed 3 field goals, really had a couple bad turnovers as well. Cal certainly should have won that game. Auburn, I'm not going to panic, though. It's a tough road trip, tough late-night swing, so I think Auburn will be just fine. I don't really think there's anything crazy to raise. Also, the weather was kind of poor out there in Berkeley, so I think you can give a mulligan on that one, but Cal impressed me. Certainly put a dogfight in there. Clemson looked very poor in the first half, to get up 17 points to Charleston Southern. They were losing at points in that game, but they hit the gas in the second half, pulled away late. Clemson, trying to figure out what really is their true identity this year. Oklahoma concerns me, struggled against SMU, a 17-point win against SMU, and they really looked poor. They were only leading by about 10 at half. Really struggled against a Mustangs team that's trying to find their way as they prepare to transfer to a new conference. Kansas State dominated a good Troy team at home. Kansas State's for real in the Big 12. They're 2-0. They look really good. Will Howard is playing fantastic football. 250 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception for him. Pierce Brooks as well, 94 yards and 1 touchdown for him. Very good showing from Kansas State against a really solid Troy team that is certainly no slouch. Tennessee, slow through the gates against Austin Peay. They struggled a little bit there. Florida State, Michigan, Ohio State, USC, Georgia all dominate their token opposition. Typical week 2 sort of thing you see there. Overall, though, a lot of big movements in college football this week. A lot going on as we move closer and closer to conference play, where a lot of these teams can get tested week in, week out.
Yeah, I totally missed Mississippi State beats Arizona in overtime. Game that's flew under the radar there. That's me for today's episode, Nick. I appreciate you joining me.
Absolutely. Looking forward to week 3.
Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.